Okay, well, so I am going to tell you how God has worked in my life for the past three.
Use the mic. You won't be able
Which
to-
one? Yeah.
Whichever one you want.
Oh,
You want to
okay. So yeah, I'm going to tell you how God has worked in my life the past few months. Some of you know the big picture, but not the little details. You know, some of you, have never met me and don't know any of it. So I will quickly give you a summary of some of the details. So on May 10th of this year, on US 23 near Pikeville, I had an accident. Beth, my daughter Beth, was with me. She's 16 now. We don't know what caused it. I'll never know on this side of heaven what caused the accident. But the van rolled several times and crashed into a concrete wall and a semi-truck. I was in a coma for a week and in the hospital for 7 weeks. I had so much blood on my brain that the doctor said that it would take at least a year for it all to be reabsorbed, and it might never all reabsorb. I had what was called a traumatic brain injury, or TBI, and as a result of that, I was not myself. Is a nice way to say it. I was rude to some of my nurses and doctors that were taking care of me. I was ripping out IVs and catheters to the point where they had to strap me down. Beth, who was in the hospital with me, in a room down the hall from mine for part of the time that I was in there, part of the 7 weeks, she told me this the other day. She said, "Dad, I pushed my nurse call button more times because I heard yelling coming from your room than I did because I needed help myself." And, and I don't remember any of this. I actually think that it's sort of a blessing that my memory from this time is gone. But I don't remember any of the 7 weeks that I was in the hospital. I remember about the last week and a half, and obviously the first week that I was in the coma, I don't remember. But even the 5 weeks after that, the first 5 weeks that I was out of the coma, I don't remember that either, and I don't remember the week before the accident even, and some things even from months before the accident I don't remember. Kim and I are discover. She'll say, "Do you remember when we so and so?" I'm like, "No, I don't remember that." She said, "But that was months before the accident." I'm like, "Sorry, I don't remember." And it's just spotty. It's not like my whole memory from months before the accident is gone, but we're still finding things. Even this past week, we're finding things that are just gone from my memory. Mentally, I wasn't with it. Most of you know, I'm a physics professor on campus, so I was pretty good at math before the accident. But even at the end of my 7-week stay in the hospital, I was working with one of my therapists, and she said, "Subtract 7 from 100," and I couldn't do it. I couldn't subtract simple subtraction problems, and I didn't even know I couldn't do it. I said, "So did I get it right?" And she said, "No, you didn't." And I was horrified because I realized a physics professor who can't subtract is not a physics professor. So I wondered, am I ever going to teach again? Am I ever going to do anything that I like doing again? I was totally out of it as far as my connection with reality. I told Troy, I think, that I was teaching my daughter Beth the language Urdu. Farsi, okay, Farsi, yeah. And I don't know Farsi, but I told, neither does Bet, yeah. But I told Troy that. My brother lives in Chicago. He came to see me in the hospital in Pikeville. And when I first saw him, I said to my doctor, who was treating me at the time, I said, that guy looks kind of like my brother, but it's not my brother, that's actually a Russian spy. And, I mean, I was totally serious. You know, I didn't even know that I was being crazy. My wife was superwoman during the entire ordeal.
That's right.
Yeah. She did more for me than I could ever even say. And, in fact, the week, it was before I got out of the hospital, but it was my last week in the hospital. I said, Kim, there's no way that I could ever do this much for you. And she said, well, I don't expect you to. I'm your wife. I'm just doing my job. And I knew right then. I said, okay, I have a godly wife. If you need an example of a godly wife, that's right. There she sits. And despite, I would call her in the middle of the night. I would call her at 5 o'clock in the morning and complain that they hadn't brought my dinner yet. And she would say, well, I'd say, it's 5 o'clock and I haven't had dinner. And she would say, that's because it's 5 o'clock in the morning. I'd say, oh. Yeah. Yeah. And there were, one time I called her at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I was mad about something that I thought should be happening and wasn't, or something. And she stayed in a hotel in Pikeville for almost the whole 7 weeks. And one night I called her at her hotel at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I was mad about something. I don't even remember what it was I was mad about. And she couldn't, most of the time when I called her at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, she could calm me down over the phone. But this particular time, she couldn't. So she came over. She got out of her hotel room, put her clothes on, came over to the hospital, and calmed me down in person. So, anyway, yeah. Despite Kim taking that good a care of me and being that sacrificial, I told her at one point that it was her fault that I was not out of the hospital because she didn't want to take care of me at home, and she was telling the doctors to keep me in the hospital so that she didn't have to put up with me at home. And I'm telling you this story to tell you how out of it I was, how disconnected with reality I was, because she was being the perfect example of a godly wife, and I was complaining about it and saying it was her fault I was in the hospital. That's how out of it I was. Even after I got out of the hospital for 7 weeks, after 7 weeks, I still had a traumatic brain injury, a TBI. So I was transferred to Lexington to Neurorestorative, which is a residential brain injury rehab place. I was in residential rehab there for about 2 months. And I still am in outpatient brain injury rehab only once a month, I think just till the end of October. Once a week, once a week. I think just till the end of October because I think that I don't need that anymore, and I was talking with my therapist the last time I was there, and they agree. So I think that October, is going to be my last time even going as an outpatient. One thing I want to share with you is why did this happen? Well, I want to read a scripture for you that when the disciples are asking Jesus, why did this bad thing happen? And I want to share Jesus' response with you because I think it applies to me as well. So this is John 9, 1 through 3. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" "Neither this man nor his parents sinned," said Jesus, "but this happened so that the works of God might be displayed in him." And, I think, I don't, I will never know this side of heaven the specific, ways that God is using this, the really specific ways. But there's no question that the works of God have been displayed in me as a result of the accident. I will share some of those. All the steps that I just listed, the details, there were miracles in every one of those steps. I mean, we'd be here for another 2 hours if all I did for the rest of the time was just tell you all the miracles that have happened since my accident. But there's some of them that I have to share with you. First of all, the wreck itself. Like I said, we don't know what caused it, but the van flipped several times and crashed into a semi and a wall. After the accident, Beth had a crushed spleen, a crushed ankle, and a broken back. I had 2 broken vertebrae in my neck, and that was my main, and a brain injury from bouncing around so much in the car. I was not breathing after that because I was laying over. My seatbelt snapped, by the way.
No, it didn't. It was holding you inside.
Oh, well, Beth said it snapped. No? Okay, well. So I was laying over sideways, and because my neck was broken, my head was flopped, and it was cutting off my windpipe. So I was not breathing. If I had to wait until somebody called an ambulance and the ambulance got there, I don't know that I would have made it because, I wasn't breathing. And, it's not like we were in Lexington where the ambulance is just around the corner. We were about 20 minutes outside of Pikeville. But this is one of those coincidences that is really a miracle. It just so happens that driving right behind us, who didn't see what caused the wreck, but saw me stop rolling, was a Christian former EMT lady. Her name is Luann, and she saw the end of my accident, and she thought, they look like they can probably use some help. Maybe I better stop and see what I can do. So she did stop. She had to crawl through the broken window of the van to get in, and she saw that I wasn't breathing because my neck was flopped over and broken. So she propped up my head with Beth's backpack. That's the only thing that she could find that was the right size and shape that she could get to. So she propped up my head with Beth's backpack so that I could breathe. And she stabilized me until the actual EMTs got there. And this lady, Luann, she's now a family friend. She and Kim text each other, and she says, "So how's Kent doing?" And she.
That's through this church's Facebook page.
Yeah. Yeah. So Luann is the first miracle. I mean, without her, I wouldn't be here. Like I said, I was, there was so much blood on my brain when I went in that.
Something, Kent, in traffic behind you was the ambulance.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
They did not have to dispatch an ambulance.
Yeah, I didn't even know that. Well, like I said, my memory from this time is just totally gone. So everything that I'm telling you about this part is from other people telling me.
And that's very normal.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I was in a coma for a week. I had so much blood on my brain that the doctor said that it would be at least a year, maybe never, before it was all reabsorbed. My dad asked the doctor, "So, Doc, tell me straight, how long is it going to be until he's back to normal?" And the doctor said, "At least a year, maybe never." And when I left the hospital 7 weeks later, the blood was all gone off of my brain. They did a CT scan when they knew that they were probably going to discharge me fairly soon. So they did a CT scan to check the progress of the blood on my brain to see, how I was when I left, so that, when I came back from a follow-up, they would, be able to check if I was still making progress or not. And that CT scan, the doctor who had been treating me, my general physician that was at the hospital, he came in at night. I was asleep. He came in and woke me up and said, "I just got your CT results. The blood's all gone." He said, "You have the CT scan of a 23-year-old. And that was one time that I was not upset to be woken up in the hospital. Yeah. In fact, I called Kim and told her, that was one time that she didn't mind that I was calling her in the night, and it was, yeah. Well, but you still didn't mind that I was calling to tell you, yeah. When I moved out of the hospital, I was in residential brain injury rehab for 2 months. When I got there, they told me that, some people it took years to get over a TBI. Some of the clients there have been there for years and, are still, expected to be there for more years. And, I told them that I wanted to go back to teaching physics in January, and they said, "Well, okay." They didn't say no, but they didn't say, "Yeah, that's good." They just said, "Well, we'll see." And 2 months of residential brain injury rehab, and I'm done. And in fact, even my therapist said, "You broke all the speed records." So my last day of residential brain injury rehab, they actually had me give a presentation to the other brain injury people saying what I thought made me get done so fast. And so I did. When I first went to residential brain injury rehab, I had 2 broken jaws, both jaws, on each side were broken. So while I was in the hospital, my mouth was wired shut, which meant that, they would bring me breakfast and they would say, "Here's your omelet," and it's in a cup with a straw, I'd say, "You can't drink an omelet from a straw." And they say, "Yeah, you can. Here," But my last week, they did the surgery to unwire my jaw. And then after they did that surgery, I started to get feeling back in my jaw, and it started to be tingly. Well, I needed, so I was worried that I had this tingling sensation in my jaw. So I told the nurses at the brain injury center, and they said, "Well, we need to call your oral surgeon." So they called the oral surgeon, and his secretary said, "Well, he needs to be seen for that." So they made an appointment, and I thought, poor Kim, because Kim's going to have to go from Moorhead to Lexington to pick me up from brain injury rehab, drive me from Lexington to Pikeville for the appointment with my oral surgeon, drive me back to Lexington, and then drive back to Moorhead. I thought, poor Kim, and then poor me, because that means that I'm going to be missing an entire day of brain injury rehab just to go to this appointment. So while my nurses were making that appointment and telling me that they had made the appointment, Kim was taking Beth to Pikeville for a follow-up for one of her visits. And this is another one of those coincidences. It's totally God. That's totally a miracle. Before Beth's appointment, Kim and Beth decided to stop at Golden Corral for lunch. So they're at Golden Corral, and they're sitting down, and at the table next to them was my oral surgeon. So Kim says to the oral surgeon, "Hey, you're Dr. Rubin." And he said, "Hey, you're Kent's wife. How's he doing?" So she told him. And he said, "Oh, well, good. That means things are healing properly." And Kim said, "Well, your office said he needed to come in and be seen for that." "No, he doesn't. Just cancel that appointment. So Kim called me and told me that, and then so I had just finished going around and telling all my therapists, I'm not going to be here tomorrow because, I have this appointment with an oral surgeon in Pikeville. So then I had to go around again, and I got to tell them that story, and you should have seen their faces. They're like, no way. Yeah. And, there were miracles like that every part of the way. I mean, even this weekend. I mean, because I had multiple people say, I can't make it Sunday. Will you do a video recording? And I said, well, I'll try. So I asked the people here, can we do a video recording? And let's see, the youth who does the sound back there, and the worship leader, Betsy, and the assistant pastor Troy, and the professional sound guy who set all that stuff up back there, all said, no, we can't do that. We don't have everything we need. So I came in yesterday to see how expensive and difficult it would be to get what we need. And the thing that we needed was in a new unopened package sitting back there behind the video camera. And nobody knows where it came from. Yeah. So if you're watching the video of this, that's another miracle. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Another thing I want to share with you, another scripture I want to share is Romans 8:26-28. In the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit Himself intercedes for us through wordless groans. And He who searches our hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance with the will of God. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. That verse has been evident for me for the whole time, that God is using this for good. The first 5 weeks, I wasn't really thinking anything, or not anything coherent anyway. But, from the first time that I became coherent enough to actually think, why did this happen? Why did God allow this to happen? And I don't think, God's not the one that caused the accident. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that because it happened, I remember thinking of this verse from the very beginning when I was first aware of what was going on, that, okay, something really bad happened, but God promises me that He's going to use it for good. And, I can't say that I never got discouraged or anything like that, but always ultimately, I thought that, I leaned on this promise. And I can already say that, God has and is using it for good. All those miracles that I just told you about, Him displaying His works in my life. Lots of people, when I would tell them that, they'd, no way. It's, yeah. So I would like to share some other ways that I think God has used this for good in my life, to show you how He's been faithful in keeping that promise to me. I think He made my relationships with my family stronger. It's not like I didn't think that my family relationships were unimportant before the accident or anything like that, or that, Kim and I had a bad relationship before that or anything. But believe me, I really know. I knew before that she was on my side and that she was going to take care of me, but I really, really know it now. Amen. I knew that about my parents, but they confirmed that too. They live in Tennessee near Nashville, and they came up to Pikeville and stayed for weeks. I helped Kim and the girls, and came to my house and took care of stuff around the house while Kim was in Pikeville taking care of me. Stayed in Pikeville while Kim came back and did stuff in Moorhead that she had to do. Not just my parents, but my mother's sister came and stayed for a while. My mother's brother came and stayed for a while. So, I knew that I had a great family before, but this just proves it. Am I leaving out any?
I said my mom came twice too.
Okay, yeah. So God has used it to reinforce my relationships with my family. That's one way that He used it for good. He also reinforced my dependence on Him and His grace. You haven't had a real feeling of helplessness until you're in the hospital. You can't sit up. You can't go to the bathroom by yourself. And you can't feed yourself. You basically can't do anything at all. It's at moments like that when you realize, okay, I'm dependent on God. I mean, everybody has to do everything for me, and if God sends somebody to do those things, I'll be okay. And if He doesn't, then I'll die. So, I pretty quickly learned that it's okay to ask for help. I'm the kind of person that sometimes doesn't like, I like to do everything myself. I don't like to ask for help. But when you have to ask for help to go to the bathroom, then, you kind of get over being reluctant to ask for help.
That's nicely put.
Yeah. I think it just reinforced my dependence on God and His grace, because I realized, if God provides people to do these things, if God provides the physical things that even not just the people, but just the healing ability. If God helps me get better, I'll get better, and if He doesn't, then I'll die. And so I really, He reinforced my dependence on Him. He showed me how blessed I am by my whole support network, not just my family. This church was awesome. And that was kind of a reinforcing thing. I already knew that before the accident. It was sort of like I knew I had a great family before the accident. I knew I had a great church before the accident too. But the church answered the call. People brought Kim food, other thing. You all were there multiple times. I don't remember any of them, but Kim kept a list. Kim knew that I wouldn't.
We just told you we were.
Yeah. Well, and Kim knew that I would have no idea who was coming. So she actually kept a list so that when I got to the hospital, I could read it. I'm like, wow, all those people came? And, so I already knew I had a great church and a great family, but other people that I would have never predicted would do stuff to help, did stuff to help. People all over Moorhead. People all over my neighborhood. My neighbor, my next door neighbor has been mowing my yard since May 10th. We didn't ask him. He just started doing it. And, Kim asked him, after he'd been doing it for all, so what can I pay you to do? Oh, nothing, just take care of your family. And Kim goes to, and people from all over the neighborhood, from other churches, brought us meals over and over again. Kim goes to local businesses, and she gets ready to check out, and they say, "Oh, there's no charge today. Just go take care of your family." And that's happened at 3 or 4 different businesses. At some, have you paid for a haircut since the accident?
Not the first one though.
Okay.
And she washed Beth's hair once a week because Beth was in a neck brace, and we couldn't wash her hair, so she went and used a special sink to.
Yeah. So just stuff like that. President Andrews at the university called Kim personally more than once to check on me. my boss, my department chair, before we even knew what my prognosis was going to be or anything, before Kim even asked. You know, this was way early before we even knew whether or not I would be able to come back even in August. We didn't know yet. And he told Kim, hey, Kent has enough sick leave to take the whole semester off. Just have him take the whole semester off and come back in January if he can, but if not, that's okay. He can come back in the fall of 18. We'll save his spot. And, you know, that was before we even asked him. He just told us that. And I am going back in January. And even then, they're being nice to me by, you know, usually we have to teach 3 or 4 different classes, so we have maybe 3 or 4 different preps of, you know, lessons to get ready for and tests to make and things like that. But in the spring, they gave me several sections of the same easy class, so that I only have 1 prep. And it's something that I've taught for 17 years. Wow. So I could probably go in with no prep. You know, and all I'll really have to do is grade the tests. Wow. And you know, they did that before I asked. You know, they just said, you know, we know that working your way back into regular life is going to be hard on you. So, you know, we're doing this to help. Wow. So my support network, you know, has been awesome. And you know, one of the ways that God's used this for good is He's shown me what a support network I have. That, you know, what a good church I live in, what a good family I have, what a good community, and what a good university I work at. He has strengthened other people's faith and answered prayer.
Yeah.
I was on a lot of prayer lists. Yeah, every prayer list, right. And you know, people would, I mean, when I did get out of the hospital, even enough just to come home for a visit, you know, I was in residential rehab in Lexington, but I got to come home on the weekends. So I would come home and I would be going around town, and everybody, everywhere I would go, somebody would come up and say, I've been praying for you, you're on my church prayer list. And, you know, it would be people that I barely knew. You know, people that I thought, well, if it was the other way around, would I be praying for them? You know, and I was thinking, you know, and it's not because I didn't like the person, it's just because I didn't really know them that well. So, you know, they would, you know, I would think, well, if I heard they were in a terrible accident, I'd probably pray for them at the time that I heard about it, and then I wouldn't think about it anymore. But, you know, they're coming up to me months later and saying, I've been praying for you every day. And now that they see me walking around, I mean, you know, I also go around and people come up to me and say, you're up walking around. That's awesome. You know, and I think it is too. But you know, they hear that I'm going back to work in January, and they're just amazed. So God has used it to strengthen other people's faith in answered prayer, not just mine. I can't, you know, the past month even, I think, you know, more than one place, I've been out somewhere in the community, and somebody will say, there goes answered prayer. You know, and
Oh my gosh.
you know, so you know, he's used that to witness to other people, you know, even other believers, to increase their faith in how God answers prayer. I am a walking miracle. And then the last way that I think God